Norway was the first country to establish an Ombudsman's Office for Children back in 1981. And the reason for that establishment was that the politicians realized that since children don't have any vote, they don't have any political power, and they are quite often forgotten when political decisions are made. One very important example is to protect children from all forms of violence and sexual abuse, including corporal punishment. We passed a law forbidding all forms of violence back in 1981, but it's taken more than 40 years actually to implement the law. And my office, the Ombudsman's Office, has been very active in lobbying for different measures to be taken, everything from strengthening the child protection system, to make sure the police investigation is good enough, to have a good healthcare system, to educate children about their rights, to make sure that the children are actually protected in reality. Well, we are an independent institution. We are established by law, receive annual funding on the state budget, and we do a lot of child participation. We are a quite small office consisting of 20 people. We don't formal individual complaints, but we receive a lot of children and parents coming to us seeking for advice. And of course we have the responsibility for the whole Convention of the Rights of the Child, which means that we work with everything from bullying to sexual abuse, to child welfare services, children's right to be heard, just to name some things. So if the government doesn't listen or the ministry doesn't listen, we can try to be in contact with parliamentarians and make them ask questions, for example, within the parliament. We always do a lot of work with the media also. So if we see a big child rights problem and the politicians don't act, we use media, and that can also be quite successful sometimes. We do a lot of child participation in our office. That means that if we are, for example, working with violence, we have expert meetings and expert groups with children that has experiences in being abused or exposed to violence. And they give us some really good advice on how the system can be made better to protect children and what they needed. And then we quite often create a report and we launch the advices from the children and give them to the politicians. Sometimes we also arrange meetings between the politicians and the children, which can be quite successful. It's a very important part of our work, and also a very important asset we have got through our mandate, that we have the right to access all relevant information concerning children. We have the right to visit different facilities like prisons or child welfare centers or institutions. And it's really important that someone visits children within these places to see how they're really doing, and that children also has got someone to turn to if their rights are violated, if they're not okay within these institutions. In Norway, 80% of what the child protection services does, it's to support families. And it's another very important aspect of child protection, that very often, I think, parents, they don't want to harm their children, but maybe they need some assistance or some help. And to create a strong system, a strong child protection service that can actually help parents, it's really important. But then, of course, in some cases where the situation is really dangerous for the child, it can be sexual abuse or severe violence or drug abuse, you also have to make sure that the child can be safe somewhere else. And then you can have this foster care system that can provide the child with a family-like setting somewhere else.